Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jum'ah Mubarak and welcome back to another episode of Jum'ah Nights. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode and found it beneficial. If you have any further suggestions or ideas for the show, please make sure you leave your comments down in the section below and make sure you like and subscribe. So as you know, we've been having our series with regards to Imam al-Hujjah, and we're going to be carrying it on this week where we're going to be speaking about the responsibilities that I and you have towards the Imam of our time in the time of the Ghaybah. And in the second section, we're going to be having a discussion about the struggles of growing up as a child in the West. So without further ado, let's get straight into the first topic. As humans, we have different skills that we use in our day-to-day lives. Yes, that's why some of us, for example, are good at maths. Some of us are good at other subjects. We're not all the same, in other words, yeah? And that's why we end up in different professions. We have different skills, and we end up in different parts of different organizations. Like when you're thinking about a multi-billion company, right? It requires people of all sorts of different intellects, different skills in order to keep that company running. And the mission of the Imam of our time is not less sophisticated than that. It's not as simple as people like to envision. It is just as complex, and it requires people of different skills, of different intellect, of people that are able to help him in all sorts of different ways. Hence why we find in the narrations of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam, the companions that lived during the times of the Imams, they acted very differently in some cases. You would find sometimes that there was a companion who was very good in a specific science and he would be a debater, for example. Another one would be just working in the market, spreading his knowledge in the market. Another one would be a lot more quiet. Another one would be part of the government of the times. All of the companions, they were given different duties and different responsibilities based on their skills and based on what they were good at and how they could serve the Imam of their time in the best way. Because our skills are so varying and we are also different in that which we are able to serve the Imam in, it's a lot easier to speak about what we have to do as a collective, as a community, with regards to responsibilities we have towards the Imam of our time. The first of those I want to talk about is with regards to increasing our collective theological intellectual capacity. What that means is that we need to know what the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam have told us to be wary of. Those things that are signs and the way that the Imam expects us to act when we see those signs. So for example, the signs of the reappearance. There are signs that we all know about, the ones that have to happen before the Imam reappears. And they're known as the Hatmi signs. An example of one of the narrations I want to discuss is found in this book, Kitab al-Ghaybah by Shaykh al-Nu'mani, who died in the year 360 after Hijrah. We have a narration from our sixth Imam, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, and is narrated by one of his companions called Hisham ibn Salim. He says that he heard Imam al-Sadiq say, he says, سمعت أبا عبد الله عليه السلام يقول هما صيحتان صيحة في أول الليل وصيحة في آخر ليلة الثانية. So he's speaking about one of the Hatmi signs, one of the signs that have to occur before the reappearance of the Imam. He says that I heard Imam al-Sadiq say, there are two callings. So this is one of the signs. It's called the Sayha, the calling from the sky. And that's one of the Hatmi signs before the reappearance of the Imam. So he says, Huma sayhatan. There are two sayhas. There are two calls that come with regards to the reappearance of the Imam. He says one of them is in the first night and another one comes in the night after that. وَصَيْحَةٌ فِي آخِرِ لَيْلَةِ الثَّانِيَةِ. So the companion asked, he says, فَقُلْتُ كَيْفَ ذَلِكَ? How can that be? So the Imam replies, he says, وَاحِدَةٌ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَوَاحِدَةٌ مِّنْ إِبْلِيسِ. One of them will be from the skies and one of them will be from Iblis. So you must be asking, how are you supposed to differentiate between these two calls? And that's exactly what the companion asked. He says, وَكَيْفَ تُعْرَفُ هَذِهِ مِنْ هَذِهِ? How are you going to differentiate between these two calls? If one is from Iblis, one's from Shaitan, and it's intended to misguide you, and one of them is from the Sama, obviously from an angel or from a guiding force. How are you supposed to differentiate between the two? The Imam says, يَعْرِفُهَا مَنْ كَانَ سَمِعَ بِهَا قَبْلَ أَنْ تَكُونَ. He says, the one that has heard about this already, about this phenomenon happening, he's going to know how to differentiate between the two calls. And this is the Imam showing you that it is so important for you to have a theological understanding of the signs prior to them happening and having an understanding of how to differentiate between them. In the same book on the previous page, there's another hadith which is very similar, which is from another companion, Zurara bin A'yan. He says he heard Imam al-Sadiq say, سمعت أبا عبد الله يقول, he said, ينادي مناد من السماء, that a caller will call from the sky, إن فلانا هو الأمير, that one of these people is the Amir, is the one that should be followed, is the leader. وينادي مناد إن عليا وشيعته هم الفائزون. And another caller will call to say that Ali and his Shia are the ones who are victorious. So the companion says, if there's going to be a call from the sky calling towards the Imam of the time, then who is it going to be that's going to fight against Imam al-Mahdi at that point? If there's going to be a call from the sky, surely it's going to be obvious that we need to support the Imam of our time. He says, قُلْتُ فَمَنْ يُقَاتِلُ الْمَهْدِيُّ بَعْدَ هَذَا. Who is going to fight the Mahdi after this if there's been a call from the sky? So Imam al-Sadiq clarifies the first statement when he says, يُنَادِي مُنَادٍ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ إِنَّ فُلَانًا هُوَ الْأَمِيرُ. He says, فَقَالَ إِنَّ الشَّيْطَانُ يُنَادِي. That shaitan is the one that calls out, إِنَّ فُلَانًا وَشِيعَتُهُ هُمُ الْفَائِزُونَ لِرَجُلٍ مِّن بَنِي أُمَيَّةَ. He's going to call out that this person and his Shia are the ones that are victorious, and he's going to be calling that out for a person from the lineage of Banu Umayyah. So Zurara, he asks the same question as Hisham bin Salim. He says, so how are you going to know that which is true from that which is false? فَمَنْ يَعْرِفُ الصَّادِقُ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِ. How are you going to know which one is true and which one is not true? The Imam says, يَعْرِفُهُ الَّذِينَ كَانُوا يَرْوُونَ حَدِيثِنَا. That those who used to narrate our hadith, those are the ones that are going to know which one is true and which ones are false. وَيَقُولُونَ إِنَّهُ يَكُونَ قَبْلَ أَن يَكُونَ. So those are the ones that said that this thing is going to happen before it's going to happen. And they know that they are those who have spoken about that which is established and that which is truthful. So both of these narrations, the idea that they give us is that we need to be on point. We need to know exactly the signs before that they happen, and we need to have a deep collective understanding of these signs prior to them happening, so that we can move as a collective in order to take action as is necessary as those signs present themselves. So what we find from these narrations is that those who know are the ones that are going to be able to make calculated decisions when the signs present themselves. And obviously the opposite of that is true, because we know that there will be a lot of people that don't support the Imam when he comes. There will be a lot of people that fight the Imam when he comes. And who are those people going to be? A significant proportion of them are going to be people that didn't know about these things. They didn't know about the signs. They hadn't read about the signs. And that's why they were able to be fooled. And it would be due to their ignorance that they would fall behind and fight the Imam of their time. And that's something that you can avoid, right? That's something that you can read about. You can find information about online. You can find information about in these books. Kitab al-Ghaybah is a very good example of that, of Sheikh al-Nu'mani. They are translated online in English, and you can find translations of these and read a lot more about these narrations so that you can be from those who are able to make calculated decisions when the signs present themselves before you. The second thing I wanted to talk about was with regards to establishing political groundwork for the Imam to reappear and to be able to use those essential tools that have already been set out in order for him to be able to carry out his mission on a political and strategic level. The narrations about the reappearance show that much of the affair of the Imam and his mission will rely on military achievements and strategic achievements. And that's obvious because we see a lot of narrations about the Yamani and the Khurasani. And let's be honest, these are military leaders. These are people who have set out political groundwork, have a strong understanding of the Imam's mission, and they've set out the groundwork for him to come back and to use them as resources for his mission. Another very important part of this mission is with regards to our financial and social capability. A lot of the people think that the Imam only needs people that are going to be strong in war, for example, or they're going to be religious scholars. And while those those aspects are very important. There is a strong need for financial capability at the same time. If the Imam is going to come and he wants to strategize and he wants to expand his mission, he's going to need capital. He's going to need financial resources. And that's why the time is now, the urgency is now for our communities to really build ourselves on a financial level, to ensure that we have businesses as a community, in order that we are able to expand as a community financially together. As we spoke about in some episodes before, this is something that's so important to the mission of the Imam of our time, and all of these things are so important to the mission of the Imam of our time. We've already spoken about theological capacity. That is very important. We've spoken about military capacity. That's also very important. And we've spoken about financial capability. And those are all things that we need to work on as a community. These are things that the people of the end of times, the people that will support the Imam of our time, are expected to have. With regards to financial capability, it's not just about the money, right? It is obviously about our skills as well, professionalism with regards to different fields. Yeah, if you have excelled with regards to engineering, for example, you would be able to use your skills towards the Imam of your time. If you've excelled in something else, like, I don't know, you're a doctor, for example, you'll be able to use your skills to serve the Imam of your time. When we talk about financial capability, we're talking about people that have skills and they have the financial power to be able to support the Imam, both in terms of their skills and in terms of their financial capability. So if we're able to combine these three things, theological capacity, military and political capacity, and financial capacity, these are the three things that are essential to the Mahdawi mission, to the Mahdawi path. And the praise that we find for the Shia of the end of times that do support the Imam of the time is that they have been praised to the extent that they are described as the best people of all time. So we want to go through one of these narrations. It's actually found in Kamaluddin wa Tamam al-Ni'mah by Sheikh al-Saduq, which is a book that we've actually looked at previously already in this series. So you must be already familiar with it. It's a narration from Imam Zain al-Abidin, our fourth Imam. He's speaking to one of his companions called Abu Khalid al-Kabuli. And Imam Zain al-Abidin, he's describing the supporters of the Imam of our time, Imam al-Qa'im, al-Imam al-Mahdi. So the Imam says, Ya Aba Khalid, inna ahl zamana ghaybatihi. O Abu Khalid, those people who lived during his occultation, the occultation of the Imam of our time, al-qa'ilina bi-imamatihi, those who believe in his imama, wal-muntadhirina li-dhuhurihi, and those who are waiting for his reappearance. أفضل من أهل كل زمان, they are the best of all people from all times. Obviously, this is not a comparison to the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. The Ahlul Bayt cannot be compared. The Ahlul Bayt themselves, they say, Inna Ahlul Bayt la yuqasu bina ahad. No one can be compared to the Ahlul Bayt. When we're speaking about the best of people, this is a level of emphasis that he wants to give to show the greatness of the companions of the Imam of our time. He carries on in the narration. So obviously, when you hear this and he says that they are the best of people of all times, you would ask why are they the best of people of all times? And you're thinking of the companions of the Imams. There have been so many times where there have been so many great companions that have supported the Imams. Why is the Imam describing the companions of the Mahdi as those that are the best of all times? He says, لأن الله تبارك وتعالى أعطاهم من العقول والأفهام والمعرفة ما صارت به الغيبة عندهم بمنزلة المشاهدة. He says, because Allah granted them from uqul, from their intellects, from their afham, from their understandings, and from their ma'rifah, from their cognizance, from their understanding of the Imam of their time, such that ما صارت به الغيبة عندهم بمنزلة المشاهدة, such that even though they are in the time of occultation, in the time where they don't see the Imam and the Imam is not with them, they make it such that their understanding is as if the Imam is with them, right? And what would it be like if the Imam was with you? You would be able to ask the Imam exactly what your responsibilities individually are towards him, right? So these people, they've reached that level where even though the Imam is in Ghaybah, the Imam to them is like he's with them, as if he's able to communicate with them. They're able to know what the Imam needs from them at every step, and that's why they've reached this high and a very praiseworthy level. And then the Imam says with regards to their status, وَجَعَلَهُمْ فِي ذَلِكَ الزَّمَانِ بِمَنْزِلَةِ الْمُجَاهِدِينَ بَيْنِ يَدَيْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ بِالسَّيْفِ. He says that in that time, Allah gave them the status of those who fought alongside Rasulullah with their swords. Yeah, so He's given them a great status. These people, which state people? The ones that have high levels of intellect, high levels of understanding, and high levels of cognizance of the Imam. Allah has given them these three attributes, and by that, they have been described as the greatest of all the people of all the times. And then the Imam says, أُولَٰئِكَ الْمُخْلَصُونَ حَقًّا. Those are the people that are truly sincere. Those are the people that we want as our Shia. وَشِيعَتُنَا صِدْقًا, and they are our true Shia. وَالدُّعَاةُ إِلَىٰ دِينِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ سِرًّا وَجَهْرًا, and they are those who call to the religion of Allah in secret and in open. And then Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he says a beautiful line which summarizes everything that came before it. He says, انتظار الفرج من أعظم الفرج. He says, just to await the faraj, to await the relief, to await the reappearance of the Imam is the greatest relief that you could get. It's showing that the intidhar of the faraj consists of that which came before it in this narration. Those who have increased in their intellects, in their understanding, in their cognizance, they have to work hard to do these things. Intidhar, when we think about waiting, it's just like, okay, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to wait. No, intidhar is active waiting. It's actually doing something, preparing. Yeah, and that's why the Imams, when they've spoken about intidhar, they've spoken about it as an action, something that is actually done. Right? And we spoke about this in our previous episode when we talked about ma'rifah. We talked about the tawfiq and we linked it to the ayah in the Quran. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu sabiru wa sabiru wa rabitu. Have patience, have forbearance, and then gain that link with the Imam of your time. لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. In the hope that you may be successful. So you have to actually work towards this link. You have to work towards that ma'rifah. And once you've attained that ma'rifah, that's when you will know what is your individual responsibility towards your Imam. What is my individual responsibility towards the Imam? And you'll know exactly what it is that you need to do, aside from the collective things that we need to do that we've already spoken about in this episode. So intidhar, waiting, is something that we don't just do sitting around. We need to be active in our waiting. And that's why we have a narration from Imam al-Kadhim mentioned in Tuhaf al-Uqul. He says, أفضل الأعمال بعد المعرفة انتظار الفرج. The best of actions that you can do after gaining cognizance. You see, he puts ma'rifah as a prerequisite to being able to have intidhar of the faraj. You have to have your ma'rifah first, and then you can have intidhar al-faraj. He says the best of actions is after gaining cognizance, awaiting the reappearance of your Imam. And this is something that we all need to work towards all together. We need to ensure that we have acquainted ourselves with the narrations of Ahlul Bayt with regards to the Imam of our time. Books we can read about this are the books that we've been through. We've looked at Kamaluddin wa Tamam al-Ni'mah by Shaykh al-Saduq. We've looked at Kitab al-Ghaybah by Shaykh al-Nu'mani. There's also Kitab al-Ghaybah by Shaykh al-Tusi. There's also books like Bihar al-Anwar. There are 3 volumes specifically with regards to the Imam of our time. These are all books that we should be looking at and trying to learn more about the Imam of our time, learning more information. And more than that, reading the literature that is to do with the Imam of our time in general, the du'as that we have about the Imam of our time, or attributed to the Imam of our time. Dua al-Iftitah, for example, Dua al-Nudba, Dua al-Ahad. If we're looking at ziyarat as well, the ziyarat that are to do with the Imam of our time. When we are able to actually read these and contemplate on them and actually internalize the meanings within them, that's when we will be able to gain that ma'rifah, that tawfiq, to actually serve the Imam of our time in the best way that we can. As Imam Ali says, لا خير في قراءة ليس فيها تدبر. There is no good in reading where you don't ponder about it. ولا خير في عبادة ليس فيها تفكر. There is no good in a worship in which you do not think about your worship. It is only through that pondering and through that thinking while you're reading that dua, while you're reading the ziyarah. Don't focus on finishing the dua. Don't think of it as a ritual. Think of it as something where you are actually looking at the meanings in it. What does this ziyarah mean? What does this line mean? What does the Imam expect from me in this case? When you're reading Dua al-Ahad, for example, and you're looking at the characteristics of those who are going to support the Imam of your time, you're going to be looking at each of those lines and thinking, how can I internalize this? How can I make this part of me and my daily life? That's what you should be looking at. Alright, so growing up in the West, struggles of growing up in the West. So a lot of us, we have this problem, we grow up with this problem. As we grow up in the West, a lot of us are first generation, second generation diaspora, living away from the countries that are original countries, right? For example, in our communities, we've got the Hujjah community, Iraqi community, and the Pakistani communities. All of us relatively, we've come here in the last 30 years, you could say, right? So a lot of us, we're growing up with parents that have not grown up in the same environment that we've grown up in. We might feel like that our parents can't relate to our struggles, the things that we're facing at school, right? There's a lot of stuff coming out. There's different ideologies. We've spoken about it in previous episodes. You've got wokeism. You've got all these different movements, these liberalist movements. You've got racism going around, a lot more awareness with regards to social issues that you have to deal with every day, for example, at school. And you might feel like, my parents never had to experience this. How are they going to understand? Then at school, you've got all your friends. They want to do all these things that they consider cool, and you're trying to fit in. And all of these things are things that you feel like you can't speak to your parents about. So what ends up happening is you've got one personality at school, you've got one personality when you're with your friends, and then when you're going home and you're going to the masajid, you've got a whole different personality. So then you're balancing between two different personalities that you have, two different worlds, yeah? And that's such an unhealthy way to be, because you're having to ensure that you're one way when you're in one environment and a complete other way when you're in another environment. So how do you solve that? When you're in your communities, for example, and you feel like, okay, I want to get this haircut, right? And in your community, everyone looks down on that haircut. You want to get a skin fade, for example, yeah? And in your community, some people think, oh, you know what, that's a sign of a bad kid, for example, right? Or you want to get a tattoo, right? You might follow a scholar that says to you, it's permissible for you to get a tattoo, and you want to get that, but in your community it's looked down upon, right? And you're saying, okay, well, this is the religion allows it for me. Why is it that the community has a problem with it? These guys don't understand me. They're mixing between their culture and religion, and for that reason you're feeling constant judgment and you're feeling constant pressure. So what is it that you can do in order to kind of move away from this? If you're growing up as a teenager, for example, or you're maybe a little bit older at this point, how do you actually balance between these issues growing up in the West as diaspora? A huge part of it is embracing the generation gap between you and your parents. A lot of our parents who have come here in the last 20, 30 years, some of them have come here due to war, to escape prosecution and problems of their own country. Some of them have come here as economic migrants to look for a better life so that you can have a good education. They've been through a lot more in some cases than you'll ever go through in your life. They've got a lot of experience that you can learn so much from, even though you feel like it might not be relatable at first. When you really sit down and you listen to them and you listen to their experience, there'll be a lot that you can learn from that you wouldn't have even expected in the beginning. At the same time, you have to understand that psychologically you've grown differently to them. You're in a different environment. A person is only a product of his environment, right? So the culture and the ideas that you have had as a child, someone growing up with social media, right? The internet in itself is enough to shape a person and his thoughts and his ideologies. Your parents didn't have that growing up in their time, right? So you have grown up in a different time like that, and that's something that you need to recognize, and obviously something for your parents also to recognize, but for you to have an understanding and for you to appreciate one another for what the other has, right? So as a child, when you look at your parent and he's come here, for example, if they have moved here from Iraq, for example, they've escaped prosecution, they've come out of a dangerous place, and they have moved here to find a better life for you. They have experienced so much more than you will ever experience here. Yeah, you're never going to experience prosecution of that level. for hate for your beliefs. Yeah, when we think about hate for our beliefs here, what is it? We of course there's a lot of Islamophobia. There are people that that undergo violent attacks. There are people that have hate speech thrown at them, but this is not something that can be compared to that which people went through in Iraq as Shia under the violent regimes of the previous governments. That you can't compare those two things, right? So there's a lot for you to learn, even with regards to how to battle and how to maneuver in situations where you might feel like as a Muslim or as a Shi'i, you need support, or you need to know how to act in certain situations. That's something you can learn from your parents. The second thing is, when there are cultural issues between you and your community, for example, we spoke about haircuts, we spoke about tattoos, yeah, what people expect of you, and how you need to act in front of them without being cancelled, for example, in the community. There's a good balance that you need to strike between your worldview and what there is in terms of the cultural expectation of what you need to be, right? And that's part of maturity. At the end of the day, growing up, you will find that you have to prioritize and think about the consequences behind everything that you choose to do. Your actions do have consequences, and you have to prioritize. So, for example, within reasonable standards, right? If you do want to get a specific haircut, for example, and you don't think that there's anything wrong with it, and your parents are cool with it, and there's only a certain amount of people in the community that might think, oh, that looks a bit bad, but the community is progressing in that area, then of course get that haircut. You're cool with it, your family's cool with it. But when you have a situation where now everybody's looking at you, telling you don't do this, don't do that, and you're like, no, I don't care, I don't want to listen to anyone, I don't want to listen to what anyone says, in that situation you're just creating more friction for yourself, right? How important is that haircut? What do you prioritize? Do you prioritize your relations with your community, how they view you as an individual, or do you prioritize that haircut or that tattoo, right? So there are decisions to be made, and obviously you need to strike a balance. You need to ensure that you are being enough of yourself, while also catering towards that which is expected from you in the community. And that's so important, because that community is your people. Those are the people that have come here, and they are exactly like you. There are people of your age in the same situation that you're in. They are diaspora as well. They want to do certain other things that might not be viewed as cool in the community, while they are permissible in the religion. And that's fine. Those are things that you are going to come across, and there are a lot of balances that you're going to have to strike in life, and that is just part of life, and that is part of growing up. So most of all, you got to try your best to relax. Everything's going to come as it comes, and you're going to learn from those experiences. So just make sure that you do learn from those experiences, and you paint that picture for yourself, so that you know who you want to be, and ensure that you can build one picture, so that you're not having one personality in one place and another in another. So when you've built that picture for yourself, it will all merge into one picture that makes sense for you. And that's all part of growing up at the end of the day. So I hope that's been an informative episode for you, and that both of us have benefited. Inshallah, I'll be seeing you again next week, where we're going to be starting a new series with regards to the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and we're going to be talking about other contemporary issues. Inshallah ta'ala, I'll see you again next week. Make sure you stay tuned. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.